Hello and welcome back to a brand new episode of the Cherry Heat Check, New Mexico Lobo basketball fan podcast. I'm Ricky Thompson, recording this October 30th, the day before Halloween. Happy Halloween. I got my skeleton and Kobe Bryant shirt on here, ready to get some trick-or-treating action over the next day here. Hope you all got your costumes ready. I am going to be having a special guest on today that won't scare you, but will have plenty of Mountain West knowledge. Nick Urias, San Jose broadcaster out here in the Bay Area for KSJS FM radio, does the play-by-play on the radio for the San Jose State Spartans, also does radio work when they're not playing for the team, has his own podcast called The Sports Sentiment that we'll talk about, and he was at Mountain West Media Days last week, talked to two Lobos, talked to many other players and coaches that were at the event, and I'm going to see what knowledge he has to share with us here. I will have a short preview or review basically on the New Mexico exhibition game taking place on Thursday, which is today, the 30th, versus Northern Arizona Lumberjacks at 7 p.m. in the pit, their final exhibition game for the Lobos. So I will get to all those things. Thank you all for joining. All right, as I have been promising, I would get new and informative guests on the show, and I'm pleased to have my first real media member for San Jose, for the Mountain West, joining the show today. I have Nick Urias, sports radio host for radio station down here in San Jose State, KSJS. He also does the radio broadcast for all the San Jose State basketball, and I believe football. He can call me a liar on football, but I believe he does football as well. I'm bringing on Nick Urias to the show here. Nick, how you doing, sir? How are you feeling after your maybe one day in Vegas? Have you recovered yet?
No, I have not recovered. My sleeping schedule's still all whacked out. I'm still going to bed at like 1 a.m., waking up at 10 a.m. every single day. So,
Well, I'm hoping a young guy like you took advantage of what Vegas has to offer besides sitting in a conference room talking to old basketball coaches.
No. I had my fair share of fun in Vegas, no doubt. It was nice. It was on a Thursday, so there was plenty of sports going on. So, always a fun time down there in Vegas. It seems like I'm down there like 3 times a year now, but always a good time. And I'm glad to just get the season underway. It's kind of a little chaotic, but I got no complaints about it.
And for anybody that doesn't know, I didn't mention Nick also does a podcast and live stream called The Sports Sentiment. He was out there at Media Days, I think 4 to 5 hours by himself. It looked like what a tall task that was. So I'm going to get into what Nick saw at Mountain West Media Days and ask him the questions that I'm too stupid to answer. He has the most knowledge that I've heard of anyone on football and basketball about the conference. So Nick, I know, let me bring you back here. The media voted on these rankings. Of course, San Diego State, as we thought, was put at the top, getting all 26 first place votes. Below them, Utah State, which was much expected, followed by Boise State. And then the teams that really have new rosters, new coaches, or that are new to the conference in Grand Canyon, New Mexico, UNLV, and CSU. And for as bad as Nevada did last year, I'm going to put them kind of in the bottom in my mind with the Wyoming, San Jose State, Fresno, and Air Force, even though Coach Alford has this history of having bounce back seasons after he's down. But before we get into it, being this the last year with all these teams here and some on the exit, was there any kind of black cloud or awkwardness around this media day, since you had some coaches on their way out now, like Brian Dutcher, Leon Rice, among others?
I think it's always going to be a little weird. I kind of got the vibes a little bit when I was out there, 3 months ago for football. It's like, hey, you're still in our conference, but we kind of know what's going on. Like, you're here right now, but you won't be in a year from now. So, sure, like, yeah, there's kind of like that little bit of like, I guess maybe animosity, maybe between the league and the league executives and maybe the coaches, but it's got nothing to really do with the players. The players, they know what's going on, but it's got nothing to really do with them. Sure, the head coaches, the athletic directors weren't really there at these media days, for football or basketball. I think it's got to do more so with that and just the executives. But yeah, I mean, I want to be lying to you that it is a little weird that like, hey, we're here, but in a year from now we wouldn't. But I mean, I guess, with this whole basketball, this year in particular, I think it just makes it for a fun but unique year, just given all the moving parts that we'll have in a year from now.
Yeah, and I saw you did get a chance to talk with Commissioner Gloria Nevarez as well. She was there, delivering the strong message at the conference. Will be strong moving forward with the additions of UC Davis, of course, Hawaii for basketball, and then who am I forgetting here? GCU, of course, will be joining this year and next year as well, and then UTEP as well. So any insight from or any takeaways from your short conversation with Commissioner Nevarez that you think people would be interested to hear about?
Yeah, I think she seems pretty firm of where they're at right now. When it comes to like all this realignment stuff, things could change very quickly, but they seem pretty set in stone on the members that they have. But again, that can totally change, 6 months to a year from now. So I was just talking with a bunch of other like media people, and I have to say that we are talking about basketball here, but I would be more worried just from the Mountain West, like as far as like with the exiting members is concerned, like okay, which of the two major sports is going to take a hit, football or basketball? I'd probably lean strongly more towards the basketball side, given that you got your top three on the preseason polls all leaving next year. And then who knows what that's going to ultimately lead to in a year from now. Like New Mexico can very well be, your preseason number one in next year's poll with the new members coming in here. So I think that's the big thing here as far as the realignment is concerned. But everyone seems to be, for the league seems to be very excited with the Grand Canyon edition for basketball. I'm very much there with them. And, I think ultimately, like it's a home run, type addition for them, just given the crowd and the footprint of the league and geographically, I think it all meshes together. So, I think that was a good move from them. But you know, I Ricky, you've talked to Gloria all the time. You're gonna only get so much out of her, right? She's very strategic with her answers, which I totally respect. She's got a job to do. She's not gonna reveal all too much, but she seems pretty firm of just the overall landscape of where the Mountain West is at, because you look elsewhere, like the WAC conference, right? It's kind of getting dismantled. It's kind of turning into like the UAC. So like the Mountain West can be in a much worse situation given all the realignment, like the realignment exodus that was happening a year ago. I felt like they did a pretty good job of operating on the fly and making the best out of what was a crazy situation.
I would agree, and I think people forget that she does have ties to San Jose State, and from my understanding, built like the whole sports compliance department or the way that it operates there at the time. I could be wrong, but with her breadth of experience, I do have great respect for her and what they've been able to do, because like you said, they had to be ready on the fly, not knowing all this was coming. And for guys like us in the Bay Area, I think the addition of UC Davis, some people might not like it, but for us, we can go to those games now, right?
Right.
At least it's somewhat another team in the region here. And the addition of GCU, like you mentioned, is huge. obviously for basketball, because it's a quad one opportunity for anyone that goes to GCU, and then a quad two opportunity probably at a neutral site or on the road when they get GCU at home. So I'm right on board with everything you got there. But when you saw this bright and early on media day, this poll here, is there anything that jumped out to you right away? Because it seems like the past few years we've had Utah State or Colorado State last year, who was picked at 6 or 7, climb all the way to the top, and win the conference. So when you're looking at this, is there anyone maybe in the 6 to 9 range that you could see moving up to, second or third slot when the season's done?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting talking point. I mean, San Diego State deserves to be the regular season favorite, the preseason favorite. It's very understandable why they got every single first place vote possible. I'm very much aligned with Utah State being at number 2. And then, I think Grand Canyon and Boise State, you could kind of flip those two. Like, you could very much make an argument for 3 and 4. I would personally side with Grand Canyon at 3. Just because I like their additions a little bit more. And Boise State losing Tyson Degenhart is massive for them, and Alvaro Cardenas, their star point guard. So that, to me, those are 2 massive losses that, Boise's going to have to make up for. That middle is very interesting, right? You can make arguments for, 5 through 9. You could kind of flip them in any which way you want. To me, the 6, I guess, through 9 is kind of where we really get into it, because I think New Mexico will be a tier above the UNLVs and Colorado States. Keep an eye on Wyoming. They could potentially be a sleeper in this. We already know the altitude kind of they haven't really taken advantage of it, maybe as much as maybe like football per se over the years. But I mean, they were 8 and 7 at home last year. That just doesn't seem right. They were kind of close. I know they were kind of controlled that game versus the Lobos when they came down over there for about 30 minutes last year. I'd like to see them get a little bit more home wins. I think that could kind of boost them up the totem pole a little bit. They were also 0-3 for San Jose State. For Wyoming's sake, that can't happen. You got to at the very least get a split. So I could see some positivity in the standings for Wyoming. UNLV and Colorado State are just massive question marks to me, just given the new head coaches that are coming in, right? We don't really know what their style is going to be. UNLV's also been banged up.
If you look, let's look at those teams in particular really quick. UNLV, Colorado State, New Mexico, and I'm going to put Grand Canyon in this group, not because they have not a new coach, obviously, in Bryce Drew, but they have all new starters. Basically, they're playing in a new conference. So for all intents and purposes, this is a reset for Bryce Drew, and playing a whole new, maybe not that much higher level of talent, but a different level of talent than the WAC was. So I guess out of those 4 that have the most unknowns, which of those 4 you think has the best chance to kind of crawl out of that pack?
Yeah, I would power rank, Grand Canyon on top of those.
I would agree. I think they might have the best starters outside of
Yeah.
San Diego and Utah State.
Well, I think it helps that a guy like Jaden Henley came from the Mountain West, so he could kind of like steer this team. Like, he could maybe help like with some of the, game planning and personnel from that standpoint, the scouting report. So having some familiarity there, I think definitely helps. I know everybody's been paying attention to like some exhibition games, the ones that do get posted out there and the ones that actually have like a legitimate box score. UNLV's got like 6 dudes injured, so I have no idea what to make of that. UNLV's kind of had like this fluky, 4-year history now, especially under Kevin Kruger, who's no longer with the program, where you don't know what you're getting from them any given night. Colorado State, I just respect the home court a little bit more, so I would kind of lean towards Colorado State above UNLV, but again, who knows, because they got a bunch of new pieces.
Yeah, I agree with you. And for anyone that hasn't listened, Nick just put out a much more in-depth conference preview where he digs into each of these teams really tells you about the transfers coming over. But Nick, one I heard you talking about that I just wanted to hit on here is Josh Pasquarelli from Colorado State. Remind us where he's from and what he's known for.
Yeah, Pasquarelli. I imagine not a lot of people were watching the MAAC conference, just the big time like Northeastern Conference. A lot of their games are buried on ESPN Plus and, on a stacked Saturday slate. I don't expect you to be watching them, but was on the Marist Red Foxes last year. Marist ended up having a really good season, a regular season that was. They were off to like a 12-2 start, if I'm not mistaken. He was a big part of it. I think he was their leading scorer last year. But he averaged like north of 15 a game a season ago for Marist. So a kind of guy that's a 3-level scorer, could definitely create his own shot. I would expect him to be a big part of the Colorado State team this year, most certainly in the starting lineup. For a team that's had Isaiah Stevens and, Nick Clifford kind of be the number one option last year. He's in the NBA now. Pasquarelli can very well be your go-to, ball handler and shot creator this year for Colorado State.
Okay, thanks. Good to know. Anyone else on this Rams roster you think that could, we're not talking about now that a month from now we're going to be like, wow, this guy's pretty damn good?
Yeah, I think a familiar name that I think could, be like, could take that next jolt within his game is Rashawn Bemba, right? Freshman, didn't have all too many minutes, but, was like the number 9 guy in the rotation. Last year was a big part of what they did, was like starting a lot of their games. And, this year I can very much see like the year 3 leap, like what a lot of people expect in Boise State's Andrew Meadow. So Bemba's a candidate for that. Watch out for Brandon Rexsteiner. They're one of their guards. He could shoot the lights out. Comes from Virginia Tech, and then Augustus Kegelis, not the most athletic guy in the world. Came from VMI. VMI had a really good season last year. He was a big part of that. I could see him just kind of plugging in and playing, just being a solid role piece for this team that ends up starting. So some guys to circle, but I imagine Ali Farouk Manesh will have this team going, especially at home. On the road might be a little bit of a challenge.
And Nick, I don't know if you're old enough, but do you remember or have you seen footage of the shot he hit for Northern Iowa? That is the coach, Ali Farouk Manesh, when they used to wear shorts that actually fit. Okay.
Yeah.
He was a baller, and he had a run in that tournament. That was very awesome. So that's the most I know about him. I think he'll hit the ground running, being in that system for the past few years under Nico Medved. Of course, the best players either went along with Medved and Jalen Crocker Johnson, or to bigger and better schools. Kyan Evans to North Carolina is pretty insane to me when you think about that. But the history that they've had, like you mentioned, producing NBA talent over the last 3 seasons with Roddy Stevens, Nick Clifford, who started the first game for Sacramento, and now I think he's out with an injury here in his NBA days. But I think CSU could be that team also that kind of climbs up that no one's talking about yet again, and no one's really expecting that much from. And so I know, Nick, you were able to speak with 2 New Mexico Lobos, something a lot of media, surprisingly, in Albuquerque has not been able to do yet. They haven't had a lot of access to the players or the practices, so you had more time than a lot of people in Albuquerque have had so far. You talked to Dayton Albury, Chris Howell. What were some major takeaways or just feelings you got from those 2 older guys and what they're looking forward to for the Lobos in a brand new program here?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, Dayton Albury and Chris Howell are names that you're going to hear a lot this year. I think Chris Howell being one of the few guys that came from Eric Olin's system out in UC San Diego, because that was an older team in Southern California last year. They were all like 5th-year guys. Howell was one of the few players. I think there might be only one other guy who's probably not going to play on this team, maybe also much, but Howell's the main kind of piece where you're like, okay, this could translate and he's going to be a big part of what they do. So him and Dayton Albury. Albury was a guy, first and foremost, I think he's going to be playing like north of 35 minutes for this team. Like the workload will be insane. He's going to have the ball in his hands more often than not. And, Albury was a guy like for Utah State, like there was just so much, guard depth on Utah State. I was looking for him to, potentially close out games for them. And, when you got, Falslev and Drake Allen and all these other guys, it's like, okay, well, he's not going to close out every game. So Albury, I think, is one of these guys that started at Queens 2 years ago and nobody knew about Queens. And now he's kind of built his, career to what it is right now. He's gonna be probably one of the top scorers in the Mountain West this year. He's got the ball in his hands. He'd be able to distribute as well. So I like the New Mexico is having a lot of faith in him, navigating this offense, and I think he's gonna do very well just from the sample size that we had at Utah State last year. So those are the two guys. There's a reason they brought him out to media day, and I'd expect them to be a big part of what they do.
And I was lucky enough to be sitting on media row with you in San Jose State last year when your Spartans hit that dramatic game winner, Mr. Latrell Davis, on an offensive rebound to silence the Lobos there. So I don't want to go too far without talking about San Jose State and Air Force and Fresno, kind of the bottom dwellers. You kind of hit on Wyoming. I agree about Wyoming. I think they're going to have to play a more up-tempo pace this year. Last year, they purposely tried to make the game slow, but I think they have a different type of athlete now in Leland Walker, Demarion Dennis, who they're calling Dennis the Menace, I guess, on the defensive end, Caden Bennett, among others. So I think Wyoming could surprise some people as well and possibly win a few of those games that you mentioned that they were close in last year but couldn't really pull out. But when you're looking at your San Jose State Spartans losing Will McClendon, North Texas, I believe the Lobos were looking at him in the portal, and I was hoping they could get him until they got Albury. They're kind of plays not maybe the similar style, but obviously both scoring point guards. And then Latrell Davis, obviously going to the Aztecs of San Diego State, losing Josh Aduje, the big man to Minnesota, Rob Viola. I'm probably saying that wrong at this moment, but what do we have on tap for Tim Miles this year? It looks like they brought in some good talent here.
Yeah, so obviously, Tim Miles, a new starting five yet again this year. Pretty much did the same rinse and repeat a year ago. Because Rob Viola was injured 2 years ago as well, the entirety of the year. So, this is kind of nothing new of what we're doing out here in San Jose. To Tim Miles' credit, he's kind of been putting a new roster together, and he's kind of been doing a great job just given the NIL situation, which hasn't really improved, I would say, drastically. It's probably, I don't know the exact numbers, but it's still, towards the bottom portion of the Mountain West as far as, revenue and what they got going over there. But he's doing a good job of what he's bringing in. Aduje was a guy last year that was third team All Mountain West. He's no longer on the team, but they're going to try to do their best in replacing some guys. I look to a guy in Colby Garland, came from Longwood. He'll be the starting point guard Monday night at Utah. One of the better distributors in the Big South last year, which was, a solid conference, that mainly features a bunch of East Coast teams in Virginia. Very solid and productive in what he was doing with the Longwood Lancers. So he comes over. He'll be more than capable of putting up, 12 to 15 a game. But there's some other guys in here that I really like as well. Keep an eye on Adrian Myers. I'd imagine he's like your starting forward, starting at the the 3 spot for SJSU.
He's a red shirt
Yeah, he
redshirt
redshirted
freshman?
last year.
Okay, yeah, I heard, I think at media day that the other players that were there were saying he's gonna be a guy, so
Yeah.
okay.
He'll most certainly be a guy. He's a really good three-point shooter. I'd expect him in the 33% range, for him. But yeah, I think defensively, San Jose State hasn't been great over the years. I think this is a roster that could definitely get improved defensively. Jermaine Washington, just a gigantic disruptor. For a guy that was a freshman and playing a bunch last year, that's a guy that's going to pick you up full court. I mean, he was throwing the San Diego State guys in a loop last year, so he's definitely a guy. Javon Hanna, I think, is another guy to circle. A great disruptor as well. Is going to play two ways. Came from Western Michigan. He wanted a bigger role, and he's going to get it this year. And SJSU loses Rob Viola, but I think Yafet Mondi, a little bit more athletic than Viola. Viola did a lot of ball handling, on the outside, a lot of dribble handoffs. You might not get that as much as Viola did with Mondi this year, but I think some athleticism down low, I think can help some things out a little bit. And I think for San Jose State, if they can guard a little bit better, and that the scoring is might take a little bit of a drop off. But they lost a lot of close games last year, a ton. And I think if they
I
could
mean,
close out
they
a little bit
weren't they
better.
up like 20 points on San Diego State in one of
They
those
had San
games in the
Diego
first
twice
half?
last year, and they had New Mexico at the pit as well. There was a bunch of situations last year where they could have gotten some teams out there. But there's no doubt that the Latrell Davis element of all of this is massive, because I personally thought that he was one of the more marketable players that San Jose State's ever had. He brought the swagger. This was a guy that came in as a freshman, kind of was, quite honestly, one of the best kept secrets in the Mountain West. What This team was extremely banged up, and then they were forced to start him last year, and then he was kind of the engine to their offense. So Davis, going to San Diego State, which I really don't know how many minutes he's going to get down there. So we'll see what happens. I think it's a big loss for San Jose State in that regard, just because he's an absolute motor when he's got the ball.
Yeah, seeing him in person last year was something. He was like a spark plug, as soon as he got the ball, kind of like an NFL fullback or something, people bouncing off of him, but also has the touch from outside, and of course, hit that game winner versus the Lobos. Yeah, I think, I wish they could have kept him just because I loved him, but I kind of see Jermaine Washington as their new energy guy, like you mentioned. He's everywhere, got the high socks, short shorts, sticks out on the court just by the way he looks. But then when you see him play, he plays a million miles an hour at all times. It's usually under control. But I look for his game to grow this year too, and I'm looking forward to seeing San Jose State play. When we look at probably the bottom two teams here, Coach Vance Wahlberg's Bulldogs of Fresno State, they did somehow retain Zion Collins, who will be their starting point guard. I think he averaged over double digits, close to 4 or 5 assists last year. He'll be leading the show. They have an old Mountain West player in Jake Heidbreder coming back, spent 2 years at Clemson. Coach Vance Wahlberg was saying on BJ Rain's show that, how did you get Jake to commit? You're having such a hard time. And Coach Wahlberg said, well, I promised him he would be the face of the program and could shoot 10 threes a game. So kind of hard to turn that down probably. But they brought in, I think, 5 or 6 foreign players, 4 of them who speak French. They failed time and time again, it sounds like, in the transfer portal, where they were offering guys, they would get that offer and take it to another school so they could get a higher NIL offer. And, Coach Wahlberg was striking out. So they finally reached these foreign agents, French agents, and were able to get some players. So they could be a big unknown. any insight onto if Fresno could be any better this year, hoping they at least don't have the gambling allegations?
Yeah, for sure. They went 6-26 last year, as you got that listed. I would expect way more than 6 wins for them. Just because the non-conference is way more softer this year, and like they're playing some very lousy opponents. They'll probably be in the a lot of them in the 300 KenPom range. So that's you would expect that to translate to wins. Which honestly I don't really mind for this Fresno State team, just because I think it's going to take a little bit to mesh, especially with those international guys. I think Vance Wahlberg, to his credit, I mean, he had to go out and he had to go get a little bit more strategic on how he wanted to recruit. I don't mind the move. Heidbreder is a massive addition for this team, just because I think he'll be one of the most efficient shooters in the Mountain West, if not the best. Because he's gonna get the attempts up, but if you go back to like his Air Force days, he really didn't play too much at Clemson, worth noting about. But his Air Force days, he was kind of the guy, and behind Ritas Petritis a few years back, and he was hitting north of 5-6 threes a game. So I could expect that same production. Collins is one of these really respectable shot creators as well, where he could take a body bump and then draw a foul and get to the lane. So I like him a lot. David Douglas isn't healthy right now, so he's a rotation piece. They're probably expecting him in a month from now. Interesting from Van Twalberg. I didn't talk to him personally one-on-one out there, but from the folks I did speak to, he said that he's very excited about this team, and he's been coaching for north of 40 years at several different levels. So maybe that's some optimism. Take it with a grain of salt. Interestingly enough, they said that they're going to be pressing a whole lot more defensively this year, which could, lead to some gambles. It could lead to some breakdowns, as we know. But, just they're trying everything, because they were sitting in a zone last year because their personnel couldn't guard man-to-man at all. And what that lead to? A whole bunch of teams shooting over the zone and hitting a bunch of threes. So the Fresno team, I don't know. It's very interesting. This could be a sleepy situation when teams go to the Save Mart Center, when Boise goes to, Fresno, when Colorado State goes out there. Just keep an eye on it, because there's going to be similar to San Jose State. There's going to be some teams out there that are not ready to play these teams. And next thing you know, you're down 10 points, especially if the Fresno guys are shooting it well. And it's going to be an uphill battle.
Yeah, I agree. Going into an empty gym after they're used to playing in a packed arena. You saw New Mexico a few times last year, including at Wyoming, at San Jose State. Obviously, they lost that game. And I saw the players like Donovan Dent kind of looking around in bewilderment before the game. They probably haven't played in a gym with that few fans since they were in 8th grade or something, some of these guys. So yeah, different environment definitely impacts. I won't make you talk about Air Force here. I want to go back to the top real quick. We focused on, San Diego State being number one, but I wanted to get your thoughts more in depth on Utah State, because listening to Rocco Miller last night talk on Tom Moser's podcast, The Top of the Mountain, he actually thinks Utah State can win the regular season. And I think I've been talked into it as well, when just a month ago I was putting San Diego State on this pedestal where they can't be touched. But when you look at Utah State, they're bringing back, I think, over 50% of the team. Of course, like you mentioned, Falslove and Allen are the leaders. Bringing back Carson Templin, who was one of the top rebounders in the conference last year, off the bench. Tucker Anderson apparently spent his whole summer in the gym. They said he put on 15 to 20 pounds, which is crazy, because he was one of the streakiest shooters in my eyes in the conference. So if he could get more consistent minutes, I think he's a weapon. The additions of MJ Collins, I believe, from Vanderbilt, you can correct me there, and Gary Clark. So I think having more stability down low is what this team needed. Hopefully they addressed it. But what are your thoughts on Utah State's ceiling? I think they might go undefeated through the non-con if they can get through Memphis. What are your thoughts on where they might lie, by the time conference play starts?
Yeah, what really impressed me with their non-conference last year was that they were actually, when you look back on it, like this offseason, you're like, wow, that team made an NCAA tournament bid. This team wasn't all so bad. And you'd look at the scores and they drill them by 30. So, it was crazy what they were doing last year. I think they could very much be on that same trajectory where they could win a ton of these non-conference games just based on their defense and their ball pressure. Mason Falslev is obviously one of the probably he almost reminds me of like a Jalen House from like a game record defensive standpoint, where he's going to put all kinds of pressure on you, and you already know he's going to get 3 steals a game. So Falslev I personally thought he should have been a preseason player of the year.
Me
You,
too.
yeah. So, and I get it, like San Diego State, they got a lot of hype. So they're going to go with, a guy like Miles Bird and tested the NBA waters. But I think Falslev, as far as impact is concerned this year with his team, wouldn't be shocked if he's player of the year and, swings voters that way. I'm very interested to see this team. The guards are no doubt really good. I'm interested to see the front court because Carson Templin was a guy, like you said, he was a really good rebounder for this team, but he was also in foul trouble a ton when he got into Mountain West play, right? And they were relying on Isaac Johnson, kind of a stretch 5 type big, but he still had the length to go bang and bump with the Nelly Jr. Josephs of the world. And he's at Hawaii now. So everyone's probably wondering, okay, who's going to come in for a guy like Templin? And I guess a guy that everyone should keep an eye on because it's probably going to be his backup. He's a freshman wing, 6'9", Adeline Alamine. Jared Calhoun was talking him up a bunch. A lot of the players as well as Carson Templin. He was kind of like, hey, who's the guy that we're going to know about that we don't really, who's the guy we're going to know about midseason that we don't really know just yet? That was the guy that he immediately went to. So Alamine could be that guy to back up Carson Templin, who's only a freshman. But yeah, I'm with you. If you could get some consistency from Anderson, very streaky shooter. He's only a junior as well. They seem to be very excited about the transfers. I'm interested to see how they mesh and, where they align them because you would expect the Drake Allen usage rate to go up compared to what it was last year because he was like their backup point guard in some spots. So I'm interested if we had that same conundrum this year, just with the guard depth this year with the transfers. But there's no doubt they're going to win a ton of games at home. They might lose 1 or 2 games at home. And they were one of these teams last year too that are accustomed to just stealing road games. Like they are impossible to kill. Like you saw that game at the Pit last year, Ricky. They were just in it until the very end. And you're like, man, they're down 10. And here comes Falslev hitting a 3 that he shouldn't be hitting. And it's crazy with this team.
Yeah, I really love Drake Allen's game. I would look for it to expand this year. He was one of my favorite players last year, but like you mentioned, they obviously had Albury, Dexter, Akano, and others, splitting that load. I think he's obviously the starter, but I agree he'll be taking hopefully a step up this year. And when you're talking, I guess, just about of an embarrassment of riches at the guard position, I have to, of course, hit on San Diego State here. You mentioned the transfer from San Jose State, of course, Latrell Davis, and possibly not having minutes. Well, they also talked about even redshirting him this year, but he's been playing so well over the summer that is no longer a possibility. When you look at just the wing and guards here, of course, returner BJ Davis, who was really relied on as a shot creator and a scorer last year, I think more than he was probably prepared going into the season, with Aztec offense kind of going dead a lot of times, especially in the second half of the season. Of course, Reese Dixon Waters returning after missing that whole season. I'm expecting him to start just due to his experience, shooting ability. Preseason conference player of the year, of course, Miles Bird, who was at the NBA camps, decides to come back. Magoon Gwath entered the transfer portal for a couple weeks, still recovering from a knee injury that sounds like may take till the end of November. And then the big men, of course, Farrell Compton, Miles Heide. But then I'm still forgetting more guards because they got Taj DeGorville and new transfer Sean Newman Jr. So before you kind of tell me who you expect to get the time out of these, do you think it could be one of the maybe few issues for the Aztecs this year, not knowing, because they also have a freshman or two, I believe, that they're expecting to get minutes. Could we be maybe waiting till closer to the new year when we see the complete San Diego State team rather than early on when Guath is going to be out? It sounds like Compton and Heide are still battling for a starting position, and then you just have all these guards. It could be DeGorville, it could be Davis, it could be Waters out there with Bird. Do you think that could be an issue for these guys, just having too much talent and having undefined roles?
Yeah, that's going to be very interesting, right? I think, first and foremost, with any San Diego State team under Brian Dutcher, if you're not playing defense, you're not going to play. So that could also be a deciding factor. I know all these guys guard like crazy. Davis could get in your grill, but he's going to be very much in there from an offensive, 3-point shooting standpoint, and a guy that could, go coast to coast and get you down there in a hurry. That's going to be the big thing, right? Because I will say this, I expect Sean Newman Jr. to start. So I think it's going to be a conversation that we're having between a BJ Davis, a Taj DeGorville, and a Latrell Davis as far as who's competing, as far as like playing within the second unit. As far as if that's going to hurt them, I would probably lean towards no, just because, I like still the talent upside across the board. Sure, you might have like some guys that are, not the happiest that they're not getting playing time, but that's the situation that they're in. When the DeGorville was like a top 100 recruit, that they were able to get as a freshman. Like they just got talent across the board and given the certain situations, they might be able to utilize them all, right? And like where, hey, like Davis is, we need 3-point shooting right now. Here comes Latrell Davis coming in. DeGorville as a freshman was getting some time. I wouldn't expect those freshmen to play a whole lot. You maybe see them in the non-conference, but we already know how these things go, Ricky. When Mountain West play starts, the rotations are gonna tighten up big time. So I would that's gonna be an issue that maybe I would say I feel like it's a good problem to have, but that's gonna be something that we're looking at every single game this year, leading up to league play. Who's got the upper hand as far as the backup point guard role is concerned?
Yeah, and I think I'm right there with you on Sean Newman Jr., the transfer, because last year, like I was mentioning with Nick Boyd at point, the ball sometimes wasn't moving, I think, or being put in positions to help guys score. Nick Boyd did average, I think, 4 to 5 assists a game. So, he's a great guard in himself. But Sean Newman Jr., I think, is a true ball distributor, not looking to create his own shot a lot. And I think that's what this team needs, is kind of someone to just distribute to all these scores and run the show. And I think, as far as, like you're saying, Brian Dutcher has the experience and knowledge to carve out roles for these guys and communicate it to them and, what to expect. But on the other hand, they are 19, 20 years old, making probably good money and expecting to play. So that's just more factors in today's game, I think, with the way business is done. But Nick, before I let you get out of here, again, joined by Nick Urias, broadcaster for KSJS at San Jose State, does radio broadcasts and his own podcast on the sports sentiment. Any final takeaway or I guess expectation for this kind of final climb of the Mountain West here? Any final thought that we haven't hit on yet that you're thinking about going into this year?
Yeah. First and foremost, I would expect, the league to be competitive once again. Like, it's going to be very hard to win. on these home courts. Any road game that you can get within, the upper echelon teams, the San Diego States, New Mexico's, you got to respect that home court. Utah State, Grand Canyon. If you could, Boise State as well, they're always good at home. If you could get any road win within the top 5 of the conference, I think that's just going to only separate and boost your resume significantly. Well, at the same time, you got to avoid the bad loss as well. But that's something I look forward to. I'd expect 4 to 5 NCAA tournament bids within the league, just because I think there will be enough quad one opportunities there to ultimately, get some of these teams over the mountaintop. We already know, Ricky, we've seen it now with 2 years now. 2 of these Mountain West teams are going to be on the bubble, and it's going to be this overlying conversation that we're having, from February heading into the Mountain West Tournament Championship week. So that's going to be something that's going to probably keep a lot of people on their heels, but that's the way, with the selection committee and things like that. That's kind of where they value the league right now. And, I think we can all agree the Mountain West gets criminally underseeded. Forget about what the performance that they put when they get to the tournament, but based on the resumes and, stuff like that, they should be way higher seeded than what they should be. So I think we're due for a fun, Mountain West this year. I will say, anyone that hasn't gone out to the Mountain West tournament, this is probably the year to do it. At the Thomas and Mack Center, especially if you're fans of the top 5 in this league that are, primed to make a run. The atmosphere is as good as it's going to get on a neutral court. Especially when you throw in Grand Canyon's crowd. Their student section's going to travel there mid-March. I would be floored if they didn't. So, it's especially if you're one of those bubble teams, you want to see your teams in person. And it's just overall, it's a great just college basketball environment out there. Plus, it's in Las Vegas. You're going to have, a couple of other, conference tournaments out there as well. I think it's one of the most underrated weeks on just the sports calendar as a whole. So if you can get out there to Vegas, especially this year, just because in a year from now, who knows how intriguing it will be given, a lot of these teams leaving. So I'll certainly be out there for the entirety of the week. And, hopefully, if you're just a college hoops fan, and especially if one of these Mountain West teams, you're out there as well to experience a very cool atmosphere live.
Yeah, I agree. I think this being the last season with all these teams and the addition of Grand Canyon, and the energy will be heightened as well, like you said. And I'm looking forward to it to kick off. I'm hoping to have Nick on as we actually get closer to conference play starting, which seems a long way away now, but I'm sure it will creep up on us. But Nick, I have one final question, being All Hallows Eve. What is your best Halloween costume, and are you dressing up this year to make your way around town?
Oh my goodness, I think I'm a little old for that. I'm 23 years old now. I personally won't be dressed in a Halloween costume. I'm just gonna be hanging around, probably just watching the World Series tomorrow night. So sure, you could chalk me up as a Blue Jay fan. I'll probably
do you have a favorite previous costume?
Oh boy. Oh man, back when I was a little kid, I was a big, Cars guy. The smash hit Pixar movie. I was big into Cars. I was dressing up as like Lightning McQueen back in the day, thinking I was like the real deal. So, that I was in my Cars phase back when I was in my, elementary school, grade school days, but I've obviously grown way out of that now.
Okay, Nick. Well, I appreciate that. I still think you should go out tonight and have some fun. You're by far young enough to still do that, promise me. So do that if you can. Again, this has been Nick Urias, sports broadcaster, radio host from San Jose State. Thank you again, Nick.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ricky. Most definitely talking down the road, and Hey, we'll be sure to do this again.
Appreciate you. Thank you, Nick. Okay, the Lobos just wrapped up their final exhibition game versus Northern Arizona with a win 64-54 in the pit tonight. Started off hot, making Chol making his first 3 threes, I believe, and they went up double digits. Then the Lobos went into a cold streak for about 8 minutes in the first half where they either turned the ball over or couldn't make a shot. Northern Arizona really hung around most of the game and actually tied them in the second half with both teams scoring 35 apiece. Announced attendance tonight was over 9,000. That's including probably the 8,000 or so season ticket holders that have already bought their tickets. Starters tonight for the Lobos were Antonio Chol, Dayton Albury, Tomislav Boljan, Urias getting the start, and Luke Hopt as well. Where in the previous game they had started Chris Howell instead of Hopt and the other freshman Jake Hall instead of Tannett. So going with a different look tonight to see what these interchangeable parts can really do. And early it was working great. Their defense was causing turnovers. They were getting open looks from three, especially Chol, who finished with 20 points on 5 of 11 shooting, all of those attempts coming from three and going 5 of 6 from the line as well. So not one 2-point shot for Chol, but showing that he is a sharpshooter. Dayton Albury 0 of 5 from the field, 0 of 2 from 3, 6 of 8 from the free throw line, 1 assist and 4 rebounds. I think through the preseason, Albury only made 1 field goal in 2 games. So, not trying to read too much into this, but expecting him to shoot the ball better, probably not be a big time scorer, but make more than half his shots as he has over his D1 career that spanned 3 years. He was over a 50% field goal shooter, I believe. Tannett shot 1 for 5. Hopt only shot 1 shot, but 4 assists for him. Chris Howe, coming off the bench, did lead the team with 5 assists. And again, the shooting numbers fairly low. Lobos finished 17 for 47 from the field for 36%, 10 of 32 from 3 for over 31%. So 32 of the 47 field goals were from 3-point range. Coach Eric Olin did comment after the game to the radio commentators, saying that a lot of those shots were not shots they would like, and that he thought they actually regressed in their shot selection in this game from the game versus Washington State till now. A little concerning, being that they're not making these shots and they're taking shots that the coach doesn't want them to take. But too early to really panic. Interesting that Kevin Patton Jr. only got a little over 7 minutes. He did have a big time block or 2 while he was out there, did hit a 3-pointer, so we won't read too much into that. But I think you have to start to wonder how quickly this team is going to mesh together, what their chemistry will look like. It looks like on the defensive end, they're way ahead of where they are on offense as far as read and react and knowing where to go with the ball on offense and when to shoot and when not to shoot is going to take some time. And I think that can be expected when you're really ironing out what everyone's role is going to be, and everyone's trying to carve out that role at the same time to prove they get more probably than what they're getting. So I think the defense that they've shown in these first 2 exhibitions is promising. Shot selection is a little head scratching at this point, but I think that's to be expected as they have a lot of things to still iron out. But they will take on East Texas A&M on Wednesday, November 5th of next week at 7 p.m. in the pit. I will be providing some type of preview out there, whether it be on Twitter or putting out something here over the airwaves, and I will have a recap for sure. So looking forward to kicking the season off. Thanks for everyone tuning in. Thanks again to Nick, and we'll catch you on the next Cherry Heat Check.